As matters road safety in Kenya, and we are now joined by Timothy Kelly, the Head of Business Development at Automobile Association of Kenya. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kelly. And straight up to my first question, of course, is we are literally in the peak season where a lot of traveling will be happening. And we've also seen concerns being raised, especially on road carnage in the country. At the same time, we've also seen increased rainfall in some parts of the country, which has in a big way affected motoring, especially for long distance driving. Perhaps just walk us through what are we getting into as we go for the festive season. Are we prepared on the roads?
Thank you, Abby. I think I want to start by giving my condolences to the families that lost their beloved ones at the river Enziu recently. I think it was a very tragic road carnage event. We are getting into the festive season, and like you said rightly, there are rains and there are also a lot more vehicles on the road. And I think we need to begin to create awareness to the road users as to what is the cost of their actions on the road, especially when you're speeding, when we are driving under the influence of alcohol, when we are attempting to cross a swollen river. I think it's important to begin to look at what are the costs of my actions. To take a step back, in 2014, the World Health Organization had placed the cost of road carnage in Kenya at about 5% of our GDP, which is about 387.5 billion. And it's estimated that by now that figure is about close to 500 billion in terms of the cost nationwide for road carnage. At a personal level and at a national level, it's a very costly affair to experience an accident. When people lose their lives, you can't replace that. When you look at the pain through which the kin of those who lost their lives in the Enziu River, it's untold pain. It's a lot of pain that goes through. I still feel that we may not be very well prepared for this, but we must put our hands together. We must put our efforts together, all of us who are championing road safety, and be able to create awareness to people as they go for festivities. I think the festivities are already here. And just remind them on things like speeding, things like when you're tired, things like intoxication, things like new roads and new drivers. I would encourage people to get their cars checked. Their cars which have been moving around and they've not traveled a long journey for a long time. And it's time that before you take that long journey, go to AA Kenya, get a safari check. Let somebody check the brake fluid. Let somebody check a lot of this. But as we go into the future in matters road safety and mobility in this country, Abby, AA Kenya wants to get into some uncharted waters. We want to begin to institutionalize road safety and mobility in this country. We want to look at not just reminding people about road safety during the festivities, but going further than that and beginning to institutionalize this. And what do I mean by this? We're looking at leveraging on the technologies that have been used in other countries where they have really reduced road carnage and increased road safety. We're looking at being able to bring some of those technologies into the country and begin to lead this conversation by going forward. If I take a step back, you remember that AA Kenya has been around for 102 years, starting from when there was 0 vehicles in the country. Right now we are discussing about traffic jam, we are discussing about road carnage. And AA played a very key role in terms of bringing the first cars into the country. We borrowed the first car from a Riley company in UK just to test the roads in East Africa and begin to navigate those roads and measure those roads and be able to create an ecosystem of mobility. And now we've grown to what we are today. If you want to move from one place to another, you get a lot of traffic. And we feel like as we get into the next century, into the next 100 years, we need to guide that conversation on mobility and road safety. And we need to look at what are the developed countries done in terms of them reducing the number of accidents. I read somewhere that if you look at some countries, in developed countries, you find that there are about 1,200 vehicles for every 1,000 people in the population. So there are more vehicles in some countries than there are people. On average in Africa, there are about 146 vehicles for every 1,000 people. And yet, when you look at the road carnage and when you look at the road safety matters, you realize that we have higher deaths and fatalities arising from road carnage than some of these developed countries. Why is that so? It's because there are certain things that we've not institutionalized into our culture in terms of road safety. And those are the things that we want to do in the next dispensation for AA Kenya, to say, can we leverage on that? We are affiliated to FIA, the world body that governs mobility and motorsports. And we are also borrowing from other AAs across the country, across the world, because FIA brings together, as an umbrella body, all the AAs in the world. And we've seen what people have been able to do in terms of, creating a safe space, in terms of creating rescue and road assist matters, so that they can improve the idea of road safety. So that's the next dispensation for AA Kenya. We're looking at going into that space and beginning to even anticipate the future in terms of even autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. We are creating service centers that are going to be state-of-the-art and begin to say, can we begin with addressing some of the issues that bring road safety matters, that bring road carnage. Some of them are the condition of the vehicle. If we feel like there's a gap that we need to fix there in terms of getting state-of-the-art service centers that are going to be able to give people the right information about their vehicles and be able to look at. Today, Abby, if you have an electric car in this country, you're not quite sure where to take it for service.
Sure.
And we're looking at that gap and saying, as we go into the future with hybrid vehicles, a lot of people are shying away from hybrid vehicles, and yet they're very much fuel efficient. But the question is, I'm not so sure if my battery dies where I'm going to get a replacement. Where should I go? And that's a gap AA Kenya is coming to fill in terms of developing and establishing state-of-the-art service centers so that we can begin by providing the right information about the vehicles. We're also looking at creating a center of excellence for teaching mobility matters and road safety, what we'll be calling the Africa School of Mobility. And we are borrowing from FIA University, which is a center of excellence, teaching matters to do with road safety across the world. And we've benefited from being members of FIA by getting some trainings through FIA University. Yeah. We are looking at bringing a charter for that in Africa and beginning with Kenya, because there are many AAs in almost every other country, and in Africa we are the largest, followed closely by South Africa. And therefore, there's been a lot of interest from our partners out there to want to come into the country and begin to establish and implement some of these road safety matters. FIA is very big on road safety. And they have a big voice even when it comes to the UN Council. And in terms of, the president of FIA currently is the special envoy for road safety in the UN Council, and has been very critical in playing a part in the first UN decade of action, and now as we enter into the second UN decade of action. And therefore, we are looking at leveraging on that and being able to begin to institutionalize road safety into this country and begin to guide that conversation into the next dispensation.
Interesting. I can clearly see the company is well configured to survive into the future. And of course, for many of our viewers, they know AA as rescue services. And you've clearly outlined the new frontiers that you're looking to tap into, especially in light of the changing dynamics here in the country. But perhaps just walk us through what trends are you seeing as well when it comes to spending, especially from a company perspective. You've touched on very ambitious plans. How much are you looking to spend on this? And at the same time, what lies ahead for the users, especially for value for money, at the same time still being competitive in a space where competition continues to be cutthroat?
Thank you, Abby, for that. I think we are looking at major projects that we are going to enhance mobility and road safety. And we've discovered that structured as we are under our Societies Act, and maybe to give you a little bit of a background about that, AA was first registered as a Royal East Africa Automobile Association because it was associated with the royalty at the time. You remember 1919 when there were no vehicles. It's only the governor of the Protectorate of East Africa perhaps would have a vehicle and the people around them. And therefore, initially were registered under the Queen's Act, given a certificate of exemption from registration because of being associated with the royalty. And I think over time, we've maintained that kind of structure as an association under the Societies Act. And we've realized for us to be able to move into those ambitious projects that I've talked about that are going to improve mobility and road safety, AA has taken a decision to convert or to demutualize into a company limited by shares so that we can be able to play in that space. And one of the advantages of converting into a company limited by shares is the ability to raise capital through an IPO. Because right now, if we wanted to raise capital, we would have to go through borrowing and debt, which is very expensive. And therefore, we're actually in the process of demutualizing from a society to a company limited by shares, a process that is well guided by the regulators and also guided by Nairobi Securities Exchange, with our transaction advisor being Standard Investment Bank. And this process is going to see AA convert from a society into a company and then begin the steps towards raising capital to be able to do this. The Africa School of Mobility we are talking about is going to not only just train drivers, but it's going to train all road users. Currently, we've been running a program on pedestrian visibility. You realize that out of the road fatalities that we have, a big percentage are actually pedestrians. And at times we focus on the driver and we focus on the rider and we focus on that and we forget the pedestrian because they don't need to go to a driving school to be a pedestrian. But you forget the moment you step out of your car, you've become a pedestrian. And therefore, one of the issues has been visibility. Under the umbrella of FIA, we've been carrying out a program on pedestrian visibility, and we've been looking and focusing on the most vulnerable pedestrians who are school-going children.
All right. Very insightful.